So tell me about that hybrid blend nature of being a teacher and a practicing engineer.
Ultimately, I think most of us in the engineering field, we kind of start playing that educational role anyway, right? We just start chatting and telling all sorts of stories. But when we do that, you'll see that the younger engineers and designers, draftspeople, their minds just ticking from the early stage. It was very clear that they both complemented each other.
Sean Quilty, thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneurial Engineer podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Darren. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, absolutely. Always keen for a chat. So
Yeah, I'm super excited because I know what you do. I'm watching you online. I subscribed. I just subscribed now, and we
excellent.
can put out some links later, I'm sure. But tell me, what mission are you on right now in your where you currently are in your career and what you're doing?
Um, I guess if you were to sum up my mission, I suppose it's to have a positive impact in the industry. And I guess that's in any way, shape, or form that I can. I think that's probably the biggest driver for me is just knowing that I've got a positive impact, whether that's on individuals, on people, or on projects. And I've had a bit of a play in why projects are successful and why they'll be a great asset or something that we would like to live in the years to come. So yeah, impact is a big one for me.
So tell me, how do you view making a positive impact? What are the KPIs? I'm an engineer, you're an engineer. We like to be a little quantitative. Walk me through that. How do you measure that impact? How do you walk away saying I did a good job on that?
Yeah, this is very hard to measure, but it's probably the most rewarding satisfaction that I get is bumping into past students or colleagues, and they'll say, hey, what you taught me on whatever it was. I used that on a project and it was really, really successful and it worked really well. Or I've been struggling learning something, for years and years and years. And then when you spoke to me and then you sort of explained it, uh, very quickly I was able to sort of grasp those concepts and ideas. It's those individual conversations, I guess, that you sort of catch up years after, and you would think that you'd probably never see this person ever again, let alone sort of chat to them. But then they'll just make, one or two comments, and that's enough for me to walk away just feeling like, oh yeah, you beauty. What a privilege to be able to sort of be part of that. Part of that little sort of slither of their life that was, successful or enjoyable or whatever else. So, not a great way to measure it because that's near impossible, but that's probably my biggest KPI that I would love to continue to achieve in the next decades that I work, I suppose. Um, I guess the other one is I guess knowing that when you go to work, whether it's lecturing, engineer, whatever, and just being around people that are your people, I suppose, people that support you and you support them. And then you sort of just walk away and you know that it was a nice environment to work in. People have choices to work where they want to work who they want to work with. And it's nice to know that when you do have a good, team and you've got that camaraderie, I guess that's a bit of a KPI as well, that you're doing something right, that, they enjoy working with you as well. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because that second part of the answer, I often call that the vibe. I find when you're working with like-minded people that are your people, I find
Mm,
you can spitball with them. You're bouncing off each other. The ideas are flowing. There's no negative talk, and I think that actually elevates solutions. I think in my mind that
yeah.
elevates value and is definitely very important in the workplace. And I think too, you mentioned about people stopping you or someone mentioning something, and how to really break that down, because I feel like that 1%, I often talk about, and even in this podcast environment, just knowing that there might be one person, that you impacted their lives, that is, the greatest KPI that you could ever have, just having that one person. Tell us about that. Has there been an experience for you where, if you can remember, or something that might have happened recently where that has happened and you've gone, like, it's sort of blown you away a little bit to think that you could make that impact on someone's life?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Um, and I think sort of when my career sort of steered off into the educational space, I think that's where it really did um, compound. Probably for two reasons. I think one reason leading up to that point, I was, from a graduate up until I started lecturing, I didn't have that much experience, I suppose. So you couldn't have that big an impact on people. I was just learning as much as everyone else in that sort of early stage of their career. Um, so that probably played a part to it. And then the other part being a lecturer, you're meeting and you're seeing new students every semester, every year, and every year you would kind of learn on your teaching styles and habits, and you would improve on that. On what didn't work last year, you'd implement something a bit new for the next year. Um, so I guess yeah, I suppose the it's not a surprise when it happens sometimes, because um, there's a lot of preparation that goes into teaching, and sort of pushing that knowledge out there into the open and seeing who's going to sort of pick it up. So part of me is not surprised, but then part of me is very, I suppose, grateful more than anything, knowing that uh, they're taking their time out just to acknowledge maybe something that I've sort of done. But I mean, more recently, a couple of days ago, somebody reached out, and there was a road design guideline that I put together years ago, like 7 or 8 years ago, and I rewrote the way that road design was taught within TAFE, and so it was sort of split up into a theoretical workbook where it sort of broke down all the fundamentals, the maths, the science, the equations. And then there was a practical workbook where we would go through all the software. And so we would go through, chapter one with theory, and then we would jump in and then crunch the numbers and actually model chapter one, and then go to chapter two and sort of, do it like that. And they came across this guideline, this workbook, and they just mentioned that they've been, for a long time, years, perhaps just trying to get through OS roads and just the guidelines and the volumes, and not really understanding the whole world of road design. And yet, just flicking through the workbook, they were able to basically put it together, that afternoon, that weekend, sort of thing. So knowing that I was able to sort of streamline all that knowledge and compress it down into a way that people could actually take it in and comprehend it and then apply it, that was a big boost. And that was only a couple of days ago. So there's little things like that. I mean, that's the technical side, but there's other parts. Like, I've had students that, that they would struggle for all sorts of other reasons, not just the study, because study is only a very, very small part of your life. And so we've got, life pressures and all sorts of different things that we've got to deal with. And so in that teaching, world, I recognize that every single day with every single student. And so I would try to help, as much as I could professionally, and give them grace when, I don't know, assignments were late, or when they were struggling, or if they were just disengaged. It's not because they're trying to be, a pain in the class, or they don't care. There must be other stuff going on, and not just that one class that they're speaking to. So, yeah, I've had students that have sort of come up and just sort of, thank me for the class, and giving them that grace period, I suppose, as they were struggling with all sorts of other things,
Mm.
not just the assignment or the assessment itself. So, yeah, I guess that is another big KPI, and something that I love hearing about. It never gets old.
Yeah.
It's always good to hear, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so empowering, and being able to, give back to others is obviously, the role of an engineer, at least in my mind. Now, you mentioned TAFE, and I wanted to talk to you about TAFE. Um, how did you get into TAFE, and then what did you get out of TAFE? Because I feel like you're still at TAFE, I understand, or
Yes. Yep.
you're still teaching at TAFE.
Yep.
How did you get into that? And then, how has that evolved for you? You mentioned just previously, maybe touching on that you've maybe evolved in your teaching style and you've been honing your skills. Maybe
Yeah.
walk us through that, how you got into that, and then, what it really means to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It would have been 2014, and actually at the time, probably a year or so leading up, so 2012, 2013 maybe, I was kind of questioning the purpose of what I was doing day to day in the civil engineering sort of field. Um, I mean, at the time, I was with my wife, Ash, as well. We were living on the Gold Coast and we were working in Brisbane City. And so we were, on the train back and forth, burning at least a good couple hours in transit, morning and afternoon, working on some pretty big projects, so doing really big hours, and probably burning myself out. Well, I definitely was, to be honest. I definitely was burning myself out. And I did question for a while, like, is this it? I've got to do this for
Yeah.
another 50 years. Like, this is
Yeah.
crazy. So, um, and I think part of it was the energy and the effort that you put into day to day. Like, you do your absolute best and you're trying to, refine designs or think of, innovative solutions, and you're busting your gut to get a really good solution. But if you achieve that and you're, within the top 10% of the professionals out there, the best you'll get is the next job, basically, because that's what they're paying you for. They're not paying you to do a bad job. So if you do a good job, you'll be lucky to get a thank you, and really you rarely get that as well. So I was really questioning that, and sort of saying, well, I'm putting in all this energy and all this effort, and it really felt like I was just not fulfilled. There was no real true satisfaction, I suppose. And at the time, and I researched it, I jumped online, and Ash obviously noticed straight away. I said, look, you're not quite yourself. You're just always sort of, you're down. You're just not you. And it came up with, they call it a thrisis, or a few people call it a thrisis. And it's like not a midlife crisis, but a crisis you have in your 30s. And it's where you, I guess, I don't know, emotionally, you kind of mature into a space where you do ask, what is your impact, to the greater community, I suppose? How are you impacting others, I guess? And that really got me thinking. And I thought, well, maybe that is the reason why I was feeling so sort of deflated, I suppose. So that was in the back of my mind. And then there was one of my colleagues next to me. He got a call from someone from TAFE, and they were asking for just somebody to fill in on a lecture, a guest lecture, just to one of the lecturers were called in sick last minute, and so they just needed to just literally rock up and just sort of take the class, show all the PowerPoints. It's already there,
Yeah.
but just sort of stand in. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so I sort of overheard the conversation, and they couldn't do it for whatever reason. And so I just mentioned to them and said, oh, what was that? What was that about? And they sort of explained it. So I said, well, give me their number. I might give them a call. And I don't know what it was. It was, I guess, just out on a bit of a whim. And I suppose, as a bit of background, so my dad has been a metal fabrication teacher at TAFE for most of his career. And so I kind of knew what the TAFE lecturing was, kind of involved, I suppose. And I thought, Dad's had a pretty good job, and it's always been rewarding for him. He's always felt fulfilled and come home happy, and all sorts of stories and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, I guess that was the reason why I wasn't afraid to give them a call, maybe, and just sort of dip my toe in and see what that was about. So anyway, gave him a call. I spoke to Tom Grice at the time. He's a fantastic lecturer, probably one of the lecturers I've learnt the most from, and not technically, but just that personally, I suppose, how he interacts and how he puts students above all else. Anyway, so we had a bit of a chat, and over the phone he said, oh yes, definitely, you'll be perfect. You'll be able to fill in, come in and see us face to face, and then we'll go from there. But it was just one random guest lecture that I sat in on, and it was 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock is the shift for the sort of night class, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so, trained it up from the Gold Coast, worked all day, finished at 5 o'clock, race over from Brisbane City over to South Bank to the TAFE campus, jumped into the class. Normally I would just be exhausted, but at the end of the class, it was probably 9:30 by the time I finished. I was absolutely buzzing. I was just, it was this elevated feeling of just joy and energy. And it was all from the students. It was just that interaction of just talking, a bit about civil engineering, but then all these different questions and conversations and perspectives. And it was just, it was truly enlightening. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. This has to be part of what I do going forward, because this is kind of filling my cup now. So yeah, that was probably a long-winded around, but that's what got me into the TAFE side of things. So I jumped in as a casual lecturer, and then that grew. Eventually, I was going in and taking whole units and then delivering, multiple units for students. There was a couple of years there where I did full-time teaching, and then did part-time contract work in the civil engineering field. And to this day, I'm still doing guest lectures every now and then as well. So yeah.
That's absolutely awesome. It's quite surprising, and I've had a lot of conversations on this forum, and what the parents have done, has shaped or influenced how, I'll say the son or daughter, whoever it is, and
Yeah.
how that shaped them. And it's funny because sometimes it's a segue, sometimes it's fabrication, sometimes it's metalwork, sometimes it's a plumber, sometimes it's an engineer, of course. Even sometimes a salesman, someone who had nothing to do with engineering, but maybe had the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial mindset. And it is quite interesting to see that is very much a common theme
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
these conversations. So I guess further then, and I understand that you're an engineer, but then you're also a teacher, and I can see, what you're doing, and again, very much applaud you from the sidelines. So tell me about that hybrid blend nature of being a teacher and a practicing engineer, and then how they might influence each other.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I think most of us in the engineering field, especially once we've got a few runs on the board and we've got a few grey hairs, we kind of start playing that educational role anyway, because we're always teaching and just sort of sharing and passing on our knowledge, even if we don't intend to do it. We just do it. It's like it just sort of seeps from us, right? We just start chatting and telling all sorts of stories. But when we do that, you'll see that the younger engineers and designers and draftspeople, their mind's just ticking and they're almost racing for a pen and paper to just go, oh my God, this is really useful. This is interesting. I need this. Um, but I think the blend, so for me, from the early stage, it was very clear that they both complemented each other. Um, One part being when you're teaching, so in the lecturing space, you've got to be across the topic, or you've got to be sharp, I suppose. You've got to know what you're talking about, because when you're in the engineering world, you might just be focused on one type of development, say land development, and you might know that in and out, and then you're all sweet. But when you go into a class, you've got all sorts of students from all sorts of backgrounds. Most of the time, they're engineers from other countries, and they've migrated over to Australia. So they've got a wealth of knowledge themselves. Um, a lot of the time, it's not just civil engineering. It'll be chemical. It'll be all sorts of different sort of backgrounds. And so when you're in that class and you're talking about one simple thing like, I don't know, base course for pavement design or something, you'll get like 30 or 40 questions from all sorts of different angles. And if you're not across your craft, you're kind of stuck in the mud. You just sort of, deer in headlights, and you don't know what you're doing. And I mean, that happened to me a lot, and it still will. I mean, in 20 years' time, there's still going to be lots of questions that I don't have the answer to. But what it forced me to do was that, night or even just driving home, I'd just be ticking away and thinking. And it was never, I don't know. It was always I'm not sure about that, but I will find out the answer for you. And so that would kind of complement your professional development, because you'd fill in all these holes with the theory and everything else, or you'd find somebody that would know the answers, even if you didn't. And so that helped me, because that would then complement me at work. Because while I get stuck on a project, I'll go, oh, actually, I read on some research, or I've got this textbook that I was reading the other day, and that filtered into the sort of civil engineering world that I was in. The other part to it, I've always liked, I guess, teaching or passing on or mentoring people in the workplace. Um, my career stemmed from a very technical aspect. I was an engineering technologist to start. And so I was always teaching people at least the software side of things, whether it came to modeling and analysis and that sort of stuff. So I liked that, and I tended towards that, and it was quite enjoyable. But I recognized very early on that not everyone learns the exact same way. So you can be, a visual learner. You can be somebody that just needs to read it, and once they've read it, they've just got it. You could be somebody that just is more tactile or vestibular seeking. So you just need to, build something with your hands, like physically just, do something, or see it in the ground, and then that's how they'll sort of get it. Um, so I kind of realized very quickly that that's a great way to start teaching, and that's what I would do when we go into the industry and we were training anybody. I would try to pick different media, different sources of information to sort of give them, so it's not just a 300-page document and just read this and you know everything. And so that's where I started to play with video tutorials, or just little snippets of audio, or to the greater extent, the more sort of advanced stuff. I was messing around with augmented reality years ago. So like with workbooks or whatever, you just have a QR code and you're reading about base course material and subsoil, and then the QR code would flick on, and then you get this 3D model on your phone, and you'd actually flip it around and go, oh yeah, that's what he's talking about. So that, the 4 paragraphs of text that does virtually nothing for anyone's learning will actually go into a 3D model, and then within seconds, they're able to absorb that information. So yeah, very early on, I realized both of them were going to, complement each other. And still to this day, 10 years later, it's still the same. I'm still learning so much. There's a lot of research out there on just different ways of teaching, learning. And then and this is probably a whole other podcast in itself, but once you start thinking and looking into neurodivergence, not everyone's brain is the same. And so that's even more important, especially when you go into a class and all the lights are bright, or it's really loud, or just different ways that you're sort of presenting content. Not everyone's going to be comfortable and feel sort of safe and ready to learn. So it's just little things like that, picking up on cues and then changing your delivery, on the spot to accommodate and help different people learning. It's all a learning curve for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's you'll never stop learning, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the takeaway from you're never going to stop learning, becoming a teacher and being a teacher and the teacher. You have to take those questions on notice, and it only would actually make you a better teacher. But since you're teaching engineering, it's going to make you a better engineer as well. So it feels like by making that conscious choice to become a teacher, you've actually accelerated your engineering career as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really like that. It's a really good way to look at it. 36% of listeners won't subscribe to this podcast, and that's a real shame. If you want to help me share the stories and help others learn and grow, then please like and subscribe. Tell me, for young engineers, right? So there's young engineers out there, they're listening to this, they see you as an engineering leader, as a teacher and a mentor. What would be one of your pieces of advice for them to find a mentor like you, or to find a mentor? Because a lot of people ask me about, how do you find a mentor? How do you get to have a mentor? How do I find that person? What's your take on that? Maybe some advice for those people.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very hard. This is from my own experience. It's very hard to find a mentor or the mentor that's going to sort of teach you what you're after, or whatever else. I think it's definitely worth thinking of mentor being, plural, and almost like just the civil engineering industry in general. That should be what is mentoring your skills and your development, because you will pick, or I have definitely from experience, I have picked up on small but very powerful traits or lessons from people that I wouldn't have thought was a mentor or would be a mentor. But I would just, and it might be even indirectly as well. Like you might just see the way that somebody holds themselves in meetings under pressure, where you might get somebody that's very aggressive. And I think most of us have been there. And they just seem to hold themselves very well. And I've got one that comes to mind straight away, and just seeing how he was able to just take the pressure in, but just not let it affect him whatsoever, and just take the emotion out and just look at the technical side of things. And in a way, he was able to even break through the aggression and the anger that was the facade of this particular person. And he was able to kind of sort of wiggle through and figure out what was the real issue that was bothering this person. And he was able to get to it very quickly and then talk to it from a technical standpoint and sort of break it down and then explain it. And all of a sudden just diffuse the problem because he was solving the problem that was there. Little things like that I've taken as mentoring and very, very powerful, critical to the way that I've sort of, developed over the years. So yeah, don't think of a mentor as a person or you might have somebody that some people might think that I'll be a great mentor and I might let them down. I might try to mentor them and they might be like, that's not exactly what I was after, or that's not going to help me in my career. So maybe have an open mind. And then with that, if you want to see the industry collectively being your mentor, a big part of that would be networking. Get out there and just grow your network. And with that, I think from a mentoring standpoint, definitely, you're casting your net out. You're going to get a lot more people, and so you can filter through a lot of people and find those key mentors that would be perfect for your own journey. But I think the other side of that as well is you'll be able to find your people. If you keep your network very small, even to the point where it's just the four walls of the company that you work with, and you're trying to find all your answers there, you may not find what you're looking for. You may not find the technical expertise. You may not find that, the soft skills that you're trying to learn from either. So yeah, try to break down those walls. Think bigger and sort of cast your net out wider, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that because trying to change the narrative that a mentor may not be a person, but maybe a situation. That's a really nice pivot because it then makes you appreciate a situation or what happened in a certain way or someone's opinion that then makes you have some learning that really there was no physical, this is what you need to do. You're just observing a situation. I really think there's some power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does make for, it'll help you get out of bed when you're sort of grinding and you've got that sort of day to day. If you stop looking at it as just a 9 to 5, which none of us work, we all know we work much longer hours than that. But if you look at it just a 9 to 5, I've just got to go in, I've got to do this design, I've got to churn something out and then go home. But if you flip that and think there might be something I can learn today, and like you said, it might be just a situational, an experience that happens, and I just take something away from it. If you go to work with that sort of mindset, all of a sudden you're going to be just more positive. You'll just be, a little bit brighter, a little bit more energetic, and that'll rub off on your team, guaranteed. And then that'll be reciprocated as well. So it's like a bit of a butterfly effect too, if you start to change your mindset.
Wow. So I definitely wanted to congratulate you for the Professional Engineer of the Year 2024 Queensland nominee. Very proud of you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
What an amazing achievement. Can you tell me what that meant to you? And yeah, how did you go on that journey? And maybe what's happened afterwards? Because I really feel that is so important to get engineers to look at awards as something that you need to and should aspire to. Should be, and even a lot of project people, we're on projects and, you should put it for an award. Nah, too busy. And I think to take that time, at least in my mind, that is so important for young engineers to look up to and to see. And I really like you to showcase that. Because openly, I'm super proud.
Yeah, no, thanks, Darren. Appreciate that. It's no, look, it was a bit of sort of out of the blue. It was a bit of a surprise. It was actually one of my past students that nominated me. And again, we go back to those KPIs or those little moments, and just knowing that she said I had a pretty positive impact in our time at TAFE and how she's developed in the industry, and that sort of led to the nomination. She said, I couldn't think of anyone more deserving than you for this. So that was quite nice just to start out that whole process. And And I guess it was then, you go through, there's a bit of a criteria that you sort of fill out, and there's some, in the criteria, there's a bunch of points that Engineers Australia would ask you to sort of respond to, and why you feel you should be nominated. So that actually led to a bit of self-reflection, which I love. I think everyone needs to do a lot more of it, myself included. And so I spent, an hour or so every night that sort of week, just sort of thinking and reflecting on the last, 2, 3, 4 years. And it was on the focus of, what have I been contributing to the industry, I suppose. And so, yeah, with that, I just thought about, the industry, the civil engineering side of things, and how we work on projects, work with teams, and what I try to do a bit differently, I suppose, to what we build, the built environment itself, how we can, question the norm, and really question if what we're doing is the best with our current knowledge and the current research that's available to hand, or whether we just sit on the guidelines from 20, 30 years ago. So that's something that I'm always battling with, and trying to really question and push that forward. And obviously there's a bit of pushback from all sorts of different directions in that space as well. And then the TAFE side of things, and just the student side of things, and how I'm trying to help it in any way possible with the students, both domestic and international students, and each have their own issues and problems when they come into the industry. So a lot of self-reflection. And so that really, it was quite nice. I've got to be honest, I really enjoyed sort of thinking about the last few years, and it felt like it was a real success, I think, and really worthwhile. I wasn't wasting time, if you like. I was really trying to just push and get that impact. So to be, I guess you send that in, Engineers Australia would go through all the applicants, and then they'll pull out the nominees from that. So just to be, I guess, recognised, and Engineers Australia seeing that, and valuing what I value and what I hold so dearly and strongly, being that sort of educational piece in engineering. That was quite nice. Yeah, it was just almost just a bit of recognition that I'm on the right track, I suppose. And that was a bit of a, not just the last 3 or 4 years, but to get where I am now, it's been 20 years plus of grinding and really working hard. And it feels like it's only just been, I kind of liken myself to a bamboo shoot. Like I spent 15 years growing roots and not really, you don't really see anything. And then all of a sudden, the last 5 years, I've just sort of felt like I've really had a lot of traction and really grown and made a really big impact. So yeah, it was a lot of self-reflection. So, now being nominated, I suppose that really, not reignited, but it just fueled, I suppose, my passion to just try to do more, reach more, and push those boundaries, I suppose. Yeah, that's been the biggest impact, I suppose, since.
Yeah, I mean, again, well done. And, I really want to promote that. I think it's really important in industry, engineers getting behind other engineers. And you talked about your people. And I feel like as an industry, we really need to promote ourselves better.
Yeah.
We need to put, the people who have made that reflection, or are up for nominees or up for awards, we need to, say to them, you go for it. I'm voting for you. I'm here for you. Because I feel like, in other industries, it's very much different. You sort of think that like a gold logie or whatever it might be. Maybe that's just a bit stereotypical, but that is I think so crucial for our industry to really excel among many others, to show a very important place in society.
And I think,
Now, tell me, and maybe a bit of a flip now, how do you think that the engineering education industry in Australia could improve?
I mean, it's not a solution. It's just like pie in the sky thinking, but the cost of education is just, it's off the chart. It's so expensive to learn, really. And I don't know what the answer is there, to be honest. It's to get quality education, it does cost a lot of money. It costs a lot of resources. you need the expertise. So you need to attract the talents, the people that actually know what they're talking about. But also they can't just be technically, fantastic at what they do. They've got to be teachers. And a teacher is not something that you learn out of a book. It's experiences, and it's that interpersonal connection with people. That's what makes you a teacher. It's not the technical side. So all of that costs a huge amount of money, obviously, and facilities and everything else. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we do have. I mean, in the industry currently, post COVID, we've got huge injections of cash to just build, and keep the economy going. So there's more work than we will know what to do with, at least for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So we've got to ramp up very quickly, and the easiest way to do that is obviously education, and just bring in the next generation of professionals. But at the moment, just being so expensive, and the cost of living crisis that we see every day, it's just becoming harder and harder. And that gap, between society, I suppose, financially, is just getting wider and wider. So yeah, I suppose that is a big gap. We're trying to do what we can at Quilty Engineering Hub. That's kind of what stemmed this project that my wife and I are driving towards now. But I think it's not just us. I think it's just everyone in the industry as a whole. If we can work on capacity building, if we can work on teaching and learning, and making it cost effective, and even free as much as we possibly can, I think that would help. Because not everyone has $50,000 sitting in their back pocket ready to put down for a degree. So yeah.
Yeah, look, cost is most definitely a barrier to entry. I find too, and maybe it's probably just a personal reflection about, university, and I'm very, university is paramount. What do you think about that hybrid approach? I know some universities do it, that whole undergraduate work experience, that in some courses you actually physically need to get your diploma of engineering practice. What's your take on work and study, and maybe when is the right time, or
Yeah.
how they can blend with each other, to enable someone maybe when they graduate to be just that little bit more into the workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it will come down to the individual. Some people just won't be able to manage, or just won't enjoy managing, working and studying. And it is that sort of personal choice sort of thing. And some people will just excel in purely study, and just, knock out subjects, 4 or 5 subjects a semester, no problem. And then all of a sudden they're graduate in, 4 years, and they're ready. For me personally, so I finished high school, went straight into uni, full time, and I failed virtually every single subject that first year.
Oh,
Oh, it was an absolute shocker.
wow.
I don't know. There's a lot of reasons. A lot of the reasons were my fault, a majority really. But I just didn't I didn't get into the uni lifestyle, I suppose. And then that study, and not truly knowing what engineering, let alone civil engineering, not knowing what that was. It was just a bunch of tests, and I really struggled with that. And so at the time, Dad told me to have a bit of a think after that first year. Obviously, that was a fail, but what do you really want to do? And I loved maths and science, like I did. I loved study and work, but it was just something within that full time study that didn't work for me. So he threw down the white pages back in the day, and he said,
Yeah.
right, I want you to call every single engineering consultancy, start at A, go right through, and just ask them to just shadow, literally just rock up, make coffee for people, not paid at all. We're not talking about any sort of money. I just want
Wow.
to sort of feel what this whole engineering world is all about. And he said, that's going to be your litmus test. You test that, and then you can kind of see it. And if you kind of like it, or if you sort of get anything from that, then that might be a good direction to go from. And if you do that, then study wise, you've still got to learn, you've still got to get through that. So why not drop down to part time? And so this introduced this whole hybrid approach to me. So I jumped on, called a bunch of people, and even to this day, I still remember a few conversations that I had with, and this is a bit of a reflection on our industry, I think, as well. a lot of them said they couldn't help me. No, we don't really have anything. A lot of them were small companies. Some were working, out of the garage, but so many of them said, look, I can't really help you. And I even remember one as well. He said, look, I'm just out of the garage. It's a one-man show. But if you'd like, pop around any time and I can let you, you can flick through my textbooks and you can flick through a few things. And I thought, bloody hell, isn't that nice to just some random on the phone and you're opening up your doors basically and say, yeah, look, I'll help you. I'll teach you. So it was like a, arms wide open type experience. But anyway, I got onto Birchall's Engineering, a company here on the Gold Coast. At the time, they had an office in Beenleigh, and yeah, they said, yeah, look, pop around on a Friday arvo, and you can just sort of have a look, I suppose. I don't think they really knew what they were sort of expecting or wanting out of it, but they just thought, yeah, we'll give you a bit of a try. So that kind of, you meet and greet people and friendly and humble, and they obviously sort of like that. And so they said, all right, well, we might give you a bit of a drafting gig, and you can kind of pick up the tools from there, sort of thing. At the time, I had a bit of drafting experience. So I worked a little bit, like maybe 6 months or so, with one of my friends' uncles doing a little bit of drafting. So I was able to sort of help, in that space. So that started that working, and then I dropped my studies down to part-time, and that just clicked for me because everything that I was looking at day to day in the office, when you were just looking at engineering plans, you were, when you first look at them, they're like hieroglyphics. I've got no idea what all these line types and things mean, and you can kind of make out a road, but what's all this other stuff surrounding it? So I was slowly sort of peeling layer by layer what all these different elements were. And then at the same time, I would be in lectures and there'd be like a 3-hour lecture, but all of a sudden there'd be like 10 or 15 minutes. They talk about something that I saw in a drawing. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go back. And so I'd go through the drawing and then I'd start to piece or link these two things, the theory and the practice. And that just did it for me. And I was very happy doing that. So I basically dropped part-time. I first enrolled in the Bachelor of Engineering, the 4-year degree. That was my goal. But after part-time, 6.5 years later, I thought, I can't do this for another 2 years. So I actually dropped the BEng Tech, the 3-year degree, and graduated, exited with that qualification, and continued working full-time from there. So yeah, that hybrid work really did work well for me. So definitely I would, if people are struggling with the full-time work, and now I think it's more a cost of living. It's not necessarily what they enjoy. It's just I need to put, food in my belly every week and pay rent. So it's just something that they've got to look at. But if they're forced into that situation, I would try to, I guess, see if they can embrace in any way that connection between the two, because they will complement each other. And then when it comes to your, capstone project or whatever they call it now, like your final year project, your thesis, it's so easy because you're basically just doing what you do day in, day out. You do a little bit more, a little bit more research to sort of get a bit better. The company's going to be wrapped because they're going to get some value out of that you can give them. And then the university is going to be quite impressed because it's very industry focused and very current as well. So you pretty much breeze through that last part of the year. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's so funny just seeing that sort of young Sean Quilty looking through the white pages. Like, there'd be a lot of listeners who have no idea what the white pages is, right? I mean, yellow pages. I mean, maybe some people. And then just ringing up randoms, in their garage, and I say this to a lot to people I talk to, that engineers are so generous with their time, particularly the older engineers, and even I think at our age, we're obviously very, very generous with our time. And then the other thing you talked about, that you ended up getting a drafting job or whatever it was with your friend's uncle, because I always say to people that a lot of the engineering jobs are out there, they're right under your nose. You just have to ask, and you have to talk to your friend's uncle and talk to your friend's auntie. And they're the sort of jobs that you don't even have to apply for. It's basically like, yeah, come on in, do some work. Like, the interview is basically like, are you a nice person? Yes, come on in. And I think a lot of young engineers don't realize that. I think there's this misconception about work and about, I've got to work for a tier one, or I have to work for that big company. But they are one of 300 applicants in some scenarios. So, and then I really liked about I was just trying to think whether it was the the paid or not paid, or
Mm.
just putting yourself out there. And I think that is so valuable. And look, it's got you where you are today. So
Yeah, and it's I recognize that it's very hard, especially in this day and age. It's very hard to just ask for unpaid, just experience, basically. But
yeah,
if you can find revenue somehow to pay the bills, whether it is just driving an Uber or whatever else after hours and just in between, whatever you can possibly do.
yeah,
But don't look at the hours that you're investing and then expecting to get money in return, but look at the experience. Like you said, look at the experience that you're gaining from that. And like 8 hours in an engineering environment doesn't have to be a top tier office. It can be a garage, but you're looking at architectural plans and you're stripping back CAD line work, and you've got all these practical skills. That 8 hours of experience, it's like you're sort of building up this portfolio of work and
yeah,
experience that you've got. One of the biggest issues that I hear every single day, especially from international students, is local experience. Everybody wants
yeah.
local experience.
Local
Every
experience.
applicant, it,
We have
and
local experience.
it's like catch 22, isn't it? It's sort of, we won't give you a job yet on these local jobs, but we want you to have the local experience. And
Oh,
it's very frustrating, because if a lot of the engineering companies would actually see what they could do with a lot of these students, and a lot of them are engineers. They've got years and years of experience as civil engineers, and if you were able to just take a chance, and the odds are very good, by the way, in your favor. Take a chance with a lot of these students and just develop them for that local experience over a couple of months, and they will just. And I've seen it firsthand. They excel, and they're
yeah,
leaders in the industry now. But that's sort of what you're talking to as well. That local experience could literally just be sitting behind someone, shadowing them, and just asking them about plans and asking them about Brisbane City Council's planning scheme policy and how it's pieced together. And um, something that I tell and this is probably something that if anyone's listening that's a new student or a grad or whatever else, jump onto PD Online, any council property developments. It's like an online repository, basically. You'll see every single live and past development application. Like, jump onto it, download the engineering drawings, download the stormwater management plans, the engineering services report, and that's how you can start to chip away at this local experience, chasm that's out there in the industry. So you can say, look, I
yeah,
haven't worked on local experience jobs, but I can tell you exactly how SMPs are put together in ESRs, and how, urban utilities does sewer water differently to, Redland water or whatever else. So yeah, there's lots of different ways, like you said, lots of different avenues, not necessarily just being paid, in a top tier consultant. Yeah.
yeah. Because I was actually going to say that I think the best capstone or thesis you can do is the one you get paid for. That is in one of my views, probably one of the best ways to get paid to study. But then further, you mentioned that online, database
Yeah.
and local experience. A lot of people say, "Oh, what about Australian standards? You work with Australian standards." I'm like, "Well, go buy the standard, download the standard, read the standard. Like, you can go on
Yeah.
Engineering Toolbox, you can go on so many online resources, and just you can find spreadsheets, you can modify them, you can try and use them. There's so many
Yeah.
things that you could do to be able to answer that question with, like, look, I don't have a practical knowledge of this, but I do have the theoretical part because I've studied it and I've built my own spreadsheet. Now, I tell you what, if someone said that in an interview, you don't need local experience anymore. I mean, that's just that there's no need to even further ask the question. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
on that though, how do you feel like, and maybe you mentioned a couple of things and I'm sort of, I'll cherry pick some of those out,
Yeah.
but how do you feel like young engineers can stay in front of the curve?
Um, I think you don't sit in the corner and just grind away on your own. I think and that might be, it might involve networking, in the sense of just um, reaching out to other people in similar positions as you, working similar jobs as you, and just talking, I suppose. Just it's that communication, just networking, in the sense of just chatting to people, asking questions. Um, that's one way, because you will grow from you might have a network of, say you got a network of 500 people. And it's very easy to get 500 people in a network, in civil engineering or structural or whatever else. And then if you throw out a question, out of those 500 people, maybe 10% might respond to you. So that's 50 people that's going to get an answer to you. That's 50 different perspectives, different parts of Australia, around the world, possibly, that's actually giving you that experience. That's one way that you will definitely stay ahead of the curve. So yeah, just thinking broader, I suppose, not just within the four walls of your own company that you're working with. The other part would be, and this is something I'm always harping on about, is really, question the norm, really question the status quo. If you blindly follow guidelines, you will not grow, and your skills will be dictated by, something that was probably well written and well in good intent 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but you will never get in front of the pack in that sense. So really question when you've got guidelines, or when you have a simple table in a guideline and you look up the values and you're using that, just question in the back of your mind, go, where do those values come from? Did that come from some sort of theoretical? Did it come from testing? Is it empirical data that was based on the US on some sort of agricultural land 60 years ago? Is that really applicable to what I'm working on in the middle of the CBD and some sort of water sensitive urban design? Really question it and sort of pick it apart. Now, if you do that on your own, that's going to take you decades to get through that. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of reading, there's all sorts of stuff. But if you have your network, when you have that question, throw it to the network and say, hey, this table I'm using, anyone know where it comes from? Does anyone know where the theory is behind it? Or this equation actually came from, you kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole and you find out where it's from. Does anyone still use this equation? And then that's how you start to sort of grow your knowledge, and you let, as silly as it sounds, you let other people do the hard work, but they're not really doing the hard work. They're just sharing their knowledge and their experience. And I guarantee you, it's got to be the majority. I don't know what the percentage is, but most people out there want to share their knowledge. They want to share their experiences, because like me, they get a big kick out of that as well, knowing that they've got some sort of positive impact. So yeah, I think that's the way to stay ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's that whole be curious, dive into the detail, and then, use your network for the answer. I used to ring people until I found someone that had the answer, because the internet didn't know.
Yeah.
And then, you get to that third person, they're like, oh yeah, I did that on a project like 2 years ago. This is what you do. And you're like, oh, like taking notes, just.
Yeah. It's like opening a treasure chest, isn't it? Like when you finally get that answer, you're just like,
yeah.
Oh.
And then I find that if you don't know who knows the answer, someone else will know. And then that's how you're growing your network, just by trying to find the answer to something. And you're not even really doing much other than like ringing around people that you've never spoken to before. I still ring people I've wouldn't have spoken to for 5 or 6 years, because I remember that they had that answer that I might need. So
and then imagine, once you get that answer, going back to your network of 500 people and say, hey, remember that question that I asked? Hey, here's the answer. And all of a sudden, you're then having an impact on 500 people within your network. They'll remember you as well. And so then if they have a question, they might come to you, and just keeps that relationship and that conversation going as well. So yeah, it's just sharing knowledge, right?
Yeah. And I sort of flip it on the other side, where what then happens is you become the go-to, and people start ringing you for the answers, because they know that you have that knowledge or experience, or you've been able to source that knowledge out of your network. And I think that's that moment of engineering leadership. I think there's definitely a pivotal moment in an engineer's career at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, what was one of a rewarding project that you undertook, and how did it change you, or how did it change your approach, maybe on that then?
Yeah. Definitely, sort of as I mentioned before, I had a very technical sort of background going through my career. So very big on the software, on the modeling side of things, but then, complementing that with all of the theory and the fundamentals behind it as well. Definitely the Sunshine Coast University Hospital. That's always stuck in my mind from that technical standpoint. So a massive, health precinct, if anyone's worked on a hospital before, they'll know that it's just, a myriad of utilities and services under the ground. It's like multiple disciplines that you're dealing with. There's all sorts of stuff that, like civil engineering wise, it's complex enough. There's enough to keep you busy, but then you're
Yeah.
talking to structural engineers and geotech and mechanical and architects and just the whole lot, and it's all condensed in a very, very small, relatively small footprint. You're fitting a lot of stuff in there. um, so that had a pretty big impact because um, at the time, this is like 2012-ish, around that sort of time, um, the 3D modeling side of things was not really um, not really that well highly regarded, I suppose. Like you would model the surface, the design surface, but then all of the utilities under the ground, you wouldn't really model a lot of it. It'll be like a line on a page, a 2D, plan, and then a typical trench detail, and that'll show you conduits, and that's pretty much it. But we, the engineering team, plus our clients, the managing contractor, we believed that there was a lot of value in modeling every single thing that we were going to build. And we knew that there was going to be reduced risk when it comes to construction as well, because if in the model everything fits and everything's clearing, you got minimum horizontal, vertical clearances, and while you've got structural footings, you're thinking about scaffolding and excavations and like just spatially aware of what's going on. If we do that in the model, then we should be able to do pretty much the same thing on site. There's always
Yeah.
going to be a few things that a few curveballs that'll be thrown to us, but at least we'll get most of those issues sort of cleaned up in that design space. So that had a big impact on me because it was a hell of a lot more work involved, a lot more effort, a lot more coordination. And then just from the software side of things, software doesn't do what it should do all the time. You'll have bugs, you'll have workarounds you've got to create. Some things won't be very intuitive. And then you'll just hit roadblocks where software just breaks down, or files won't read in properly. So that kind of opened my eyes to that side of thing where it's not just engineering fundamentals. You've also got to try to utilize technology that you have at hand. And when that
Mm.
doesn't work, then you've got to think outside the box and be a little bit innovative. And so I really loved it because it was very creative. It was like a work of art at the end of it. The model that we got, it was just insane, the amount of hours that we poured into it. And then when it went to construction, it was, that there wasn't really any big issues. There were things that would happen sort of day to day, and we would work around it and we would find solutions for it. But everything pretty much worked. So it was, big, definitely right there in hit the forefront for sure.
Yeah. I've never actually worked on a hospital, so I can only imagine. And I mean, 3D modeling, yeah, it is so powerful. It's such a powerful tool. On that, so what's your take on the future of engineering? Because I ask this a lot to people, um, in different phases or parts of engineering, and yeah,
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Um, if you don't embrace technology, uh, you you will be redundant. You won't be able to be an engineer. That's my fundamental belief, and it has been for years as well. And so like looking back, you know, almost 10 years ago, I suppose, GIS was like a bit of a niche skill, I suppose. It wasn't a civil engineering skill. You would go and you would talk to the GIS team, and they wouldn't know really anything to do with civil engineering, and you wouldn't know anything about GIS. But we were able to sort of, get big data and then work that into the civil engineering space. So years ago, I saw that GIS is so closely linked to what we're doing that needs to be integrated. And so that's one example where technology, you had to be on the forefront of that technology, or else
Mm.
you would be, you'd be left out of the race. Today, we see now that GIS is now starting to form part of university degrees, so they recognize that as well. So we need our graduates to be across GIS.
Yeah.
That was something that I introduced to the associate degree of civil engineering at TAFE as well. I thought for a long time to implement a 4-week GIS program in the surveying unit. And so now every single graduate with a 2-year program, after 2 years, they go into the industry. They've got all sorts of knowledge and skills, but they also know all about GIS, how to access data online, free open data, and then how to manipulate that and use it for their own sort of purposes. Yeah, so that's one example. I mean, AI is another big part as well. I use ChatGPT. Like I purchase a monthly, subscription to whatever, so I can do a couple cool things. I use that almost daily, I would say.
Yeah.
And so I don't rely on it to give me engineering solutions, because I believe we're still at a stage where we need somebody to actually check calculations or advice that sort of gets spit out of ChatGPT. But I use it as an assistant. So if it's just knocking up emails, if it's putting together a skeleton report or a scope of works, or if it's a great thing that I use it for is converting images to text. So
Oh,
if you've
yeah.
got some, even an old photocopied dodgy drawing, but it's got some really good notes in there, I'd just quickly convert it to text, then tweak it a bit, and then I'd use that into, customize it for my particular purpose. So using it as an assistant, it just saves time. And so it's just, you're so much more efficient in your day-to-day tasks.
Mm,
But if you didn't embrace that, and you were on the other side, of the spectrum, and you just said, no, AI is evil, we're never going to use it, it's a fad and you'll be lost. In 5 years' time, I have no idea what you're going to be doing because it's going to play such a big part in what we do. So yeah,
mm.
technology, I think we just have to embrace. Whether you like it or not, you've just got to learn to live with it and leverage it as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's STEM, right? Science, technology,
Yeah.
engineering, maths, and it's a key part of our future. I most definitely agree with you on that. So then, what's the future for Sean Quilty? What's next for you? What's that next second mountain or challenge, or what's the next medium, short to
Yeah.
medium term holds for you, and what are some of your dreams and aspirations?
Yeah, look, I think it's always going to be impact. It's always going to be, how can I sort of get that or make that positive impact in our industry, just so in 20 years time, our kids are wandering around and teaching their kids or whatever else, and I could say that I did something for the greater good, I suppose. That's definitely first and foremost, and then how we do that is going to change this year, in 5 years, in 10 years time. But really, short term, Ash and I with Quilty Engineering Hub, we're really trying to push this quite hard. Ash is actually taking a lot more time into it now to help develop and just get our reach, I suppose, further. So that's obviously across Australia. We want to teach everyone, and it's all about civil engineering fundamentals, that sort of thing. But even beyond Australia, and we've taught people around the world now. And a couple of months ago, we did a free webinar for a bunch of engineers in Africa. So it started in Kenya, and then we sort of branched out. There was, I forget how many countries all up, but it was maybe a dozen countries. But something that really struck home for me was the fact that when we started, before I jumped into the fundamentals, it was on stormwater pit pipe design. But we just spoke about issues that we had here in Australia, and then issues they had in Kenya, and some recent flooding that they had. And it was almost word for word the exact same problems and the exact same reasons why we had that problem. It was
Wow.
lack of maintenance, government not having budget and money to actually go and undertake the maintenance in the first place, not knowing where their assets were, and not knowing they even had 6 massive culverts underneath this main highway. So that when it flooded, it was just unknown, and then the road was just cut off. So just realizing that, I think it's forced me to really think outside of Australia and just reach out a little bit further. Papua New Guinea, we've started getting a lot of subscribers and people taking our courses in PNG. And a lot of people may not realize, but a lot of the standards in Papua New Guinea and in Vanuatu, a lot of them stem back to Australian standards and Austroads sort of guidelines, but then it's customized for the environment of obviously wet tropics and monsoonal sort of environments, that sort of thing. So that's kind of got me really interested, because it's not just Australia. It's like, how far can we actually reach people? And I get a bit of a buzz out of that, knowing that there's somebody on the other side of the world that maybe they'll go to work tomorrow and implement some new sort of design or strategy or approach that's been working for us here, and maybe has a positive impact there as well. So yeah, that's our big focus, to be honest. I mean, I work full time with an engineering company as well. So day in, day out, I'm always trying to, I guess, push the boundaries and see how we can do things a bit better, implement new ways of doing things. And this is probably a whole podcast on itself, but looking at climate change and how we actually implement that's a whole massive problem that we've got to try to figure out ourselves. But right now, what I'm really trying to do is just spread the word and make sure everyone is aware of the impacts of climate change, particularly with civil engineering, because there's some massive ramifications that we've got to think of now. And it's not in 5, 10, 15 years. It's stuff that we've already built that is undersized for flooding, for storm surge, for tidal influences. There's stuff that's in the ground that just doesn't work. And so we've got to come together and think of solutions as well. So that's in the immediate future anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, very much, again, from the sidelines, congratulations. I mean, the impact that you're making, what you're putting out there, now looks like some reach. It's super inspiring and, totally well done. It's such an amazing thing you're doing. And you touched on sustainability, and you're right. Like, I see it all the time. Something's too small, too narrow, not fit for purpose. I see people cutting out rock for things that could have just already been done, the project before, and now it's a widening and another widening or whatnot. And you're right. I think looking at new streams of engineering, like decarbonization engineer and strategic engineer and other things, where engineering just needs to morph and change to be able to have that impact, on sustainability and on climate change for the good. And it's most definitely a pleasure to see you out there at the forefront and waving the flag. And I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks so much. So no, pleasure. And I'm always keen for a chat. Most people that know me know that now. And likewise as well, it's great to be on your podcast and also to see the positive impact that you're having on the industry as well. I think we need more people like yourself, just bringing people together and just supporting people, not tearing people down, really trying to lift people up. We definitely need more of that in the industry for sure. So no, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much. So, mate, Sean Quilty, thanks so much for being on the show. And it's been a pleasure. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Excellent. Good on you, Darren. We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Legend. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. Please like and subscribe. It helps us reach so many more aspiring engineering professionals and entrepreneurs. You can find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube.